Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. We have three of the Drs. Knox here in the house. We're happy to, as you can see right here, Dr. Rachel Knox and her mother and father here, Janice Vaughn Knox and David Knox. Welcome to the show, folks. It's good to have all three of you here. We've had your dad a few times, or your husband, depending on the case. And I'm happy to have all three of you. You have a big event coming up here on the 3rd that we're promoting. And,
fantastic.
Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, we will. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, it's an introduction to endocannabinology.
Got it.
And so we'll go into that more. We have John Cornett standing by to play a song here in just a moment. We'll be taking your phone calls as well. Hey, John.
Hey, Paul. Hi, Greg.
Very well, very well. And we'll be back right after our infamous Dancing Cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
Is from Washington, D.C., Congressman Jerry Nadler, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, and Senator Kamala Harris of California, on Tuesday introduced comprehensive legislation, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or the MORE Act, to end federal marijuana criminalization. The act removes the marijuana plant from the Federal Controlled Substances Act, requires the federal courts to expunge prior marijuana-related convictions, and provides grants to communities which have been disproportionately impacted by the drug war, among other changes. The MORE Act is the most comprehensive marijuana reform bill ever introduced in the United States Congress and is backed by a broad coalition of criminal justice, drug policy, and immigration groups. It embodies the need to legalize cannabis and restore the rights of those who have suffered under the cruel and failed policy of criminalization. By passing the MORE Act, Congress can begin to remedy the pain caused by the criminalization of marijuana. This bill provides a real federal solution by fully descheduling cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act and providing relief to those suffering under the collateral consequences of having a marijuana charge on their record by facilitating the process of expungement. The American public is ready for this, and overwhelmingly so. Their elected officials in Washington need to finally start representing the will of the people and advance this sensible legislation. This bill provides a real federal solution by fully descheduling cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act and providing relief to those suffering these law arrests. Never in American history has the chairman of the judiciary introduced a bill to end federal marijuana criminalization. If enacted, the bill would remove marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act, thus decriminalizing the substance at the federal level and enabling states to set their own policies. Descheduling will also allow the existing state legal marijuana industry to no longer be barred from accessing financial services or standard tax treatment as several other legal businesses. Similarly, veterans will have better access to medical marijuana, with VA doctors no longer risking federal prosecution for filling out the state legal medical recommendations. Given the restrictions the marijuana industry has had to abide by under Section 208E of the IRS Code, existing enterprises would have significantly lower overall tax burden than under the current policy of prohibition. The bill would tax marijuana products at a modest 5%, to establish a trust fund to assist state and local governments in expunging criminal records and setting up regulatory structures for marijuana's lawful production and distribution. The trust fund would have three functions: a fund administered by a newly created Office of Cannabis Justice to issue grants for those negatively impacted by the war on drugs for the development of the expungement processes, employment programs, reentry guidance, youth resources, and more. The Office of Cannabis would be one of the Justice Department's programs. This provision is modeled on the Marijuana Justice Act that was presented by Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey and Representative Barbara Lee of California. A fund administered by the Small Business Administration would be established to encourage socially and economically disadvantaged people to enter the cannabis industry, similar to legislation introduced by Chairwoman Nydia Valaquez of New York. A fund administered by the Small Business Administration to create equitable licensing programs in state and local government that benefit communities most impacted by prohibition. I urge you to contact your federal congressional representative to support the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, the MORE Act, in federal marijuana criminalization. Also from Washington, D.C., federal officials have approved plans for the University of Mississippi to grow 2,000 kilograms or 4,409 pounds of cannabis to provide to investigators for clinical trial research. Since 1968, the University of Mississippi Farm, which is governed by the United States National Institute on Drug Abuse, has held the only available federal license to legally cultivate cannabis for FDA-approved research in the United States. According to reports by the Associated Press, marijuana crops will include plants of varying THC and CBD potencies, including strains high in cannabidiol. As per the program's current marijuana menu, no available samples contain more than 7% THC, and all samples contain less than 1% CBD. Clinicians wishing to conduct FDA-approved clinical trials on cannabis have long complained that federally provided samples are of inferior quality. A research analysis published earlier this year reported that strains currently available from NIDA share genetics typically associated with industrial hemp, not commercially available cannabis. The crop will be the largest grown by the University of Mississippi in several years. More than 6 in 10 U.S. adults, or 63% actually, endorse cannabis legalization, according to nationwide polling data compiled by the Marist Institute for Public Opinion in partnership with the National Public Radio and PBS NewsHour. 63% of the respondents said that it is, quote, a good idea to legalize marijuana nationwide, end quote. The issue received greater public support than did numerous other policy questions, including raising the national minimum wage to $15, which just got 56%, imposing a wealth tax on those with an income above $1 million, which polled at 62%, and banning the sale of automatic weapons, which polled at 57%. As Americans learn more about the successful legalization of marijuana in state after state, their support for the policy at the national level continues to grow. So this is the same as several other studies that have been released by Gallup and other opinion polls. Our last story tonight's from St. Paul, Minnesota. Post-traumatic stress patients enrolled in Minnesota's Medical Cannabis Access Program report fewer symptoms following the initiation of marijuana therapy, according to data compiled by the State Department of Health. Minnesota regulators surveyed over 700 enrollees with post-traumatic stress who had used medical cannabis for 3 months. Over 70% of the respondents showed a clinically meaningful reduction on a screening tool designed to measure the severity of their symptoms. Respondents reported that cannabis reduced symptoms of anxiety, stress, and chronic pain, while also improving sleep and mood regulation. Patients using medical cannabis also became more open to participating in psychological therapies. The study concluded, quote, this study shows that many patients with PTSD enrolled in the program are experiencing substantial benefits, end quote, said Dr. Tom Arnson, research manager at the Minnesota Health Department's Office of Medicinal Cannabis. 18% of the total number of patients enrolled in Minnesota's medical cannabis program are diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. That's the end of our Hemp News segment for tonight, and John Cornett is ready to play a song. Hey, John.
Oh, that's incredible news. If I can just say one thing before I start playing, that is...
Sure. You got the mic.
You know, my best friend hung himself in a Texas jail when he was 17 years old for 1/2 of a marijuana cigarette. He was 17 years old. He was a child. and nobody gave a shit because he used marijuana.
You know, I have a half brother I didn't grow up with, and I
Sorry.
found out when I was over 50 that
Randy told
when
him.
he was 17 in the mid 60s, he was arrested with 2 ounces and spent 5 years in Texas State Prison.
Well,
So-
Randy didn't give him a chance. He hung himself promptly.
Yeah,
And it was over.
unfortunately,
Anyway,
that happens.
song. Happy.
Okay.
This song
Have
reminds
at
me
it.
of what the news I just heard, and it just came to me just now. Unfortunately, I rehearsed it. So here it is. It doesn't have a title. You're welcome.
That was nice. Thank you, Rachel, for coming on the show, and welcome back,
Thank
David, and thank you for coming on as well, Janice. So you are a family of physicians, all 4 of you. Your father is the least accredited amongst you because
That's
the
right.
women
Total slacker.
all have MBAs, and you have one other sister that has another degree. What is it? MPH.
MPH, Master's in Public Health.
I see. I see.
Yeah,
So
trained in preventative medicine. So along with that training comes an extra credential.
yeah, yeah. And so
nice.
you are undertaking a class on the introduction of endocannabinology. And so, and you've actually been accredited so that professionals that work in nursing or medical practice can get something that's essential for their renewal of their license, and that's
Medicines,
continuing
Pharmacists and medical doctors.
That's correct.
all of those.
All come and get 2.5 continuing education credits.
DOs or just MDs?
Yes, DOs.
Just
DOs as
DOs
well,
and
yeah.
naturopaths?
Yep.
If they can claim AACME credits,
Probably they can.
And
I bet
yes.
they can. So, you know, if you're a naturopath, you know that. But
Yeah,
so,
bonus.
if tell us about the class. I've signed up for it, and I'm very interested in. It's not just for professionals, so it's also
No, it's
for
not.
the
No.
general public, people
Yeah.
like me.
Yeah, yeah. I will start off by saying one of the reasons we decided to do what we call endocannabinology, because that's still pretty new language
Yeah.
for most people who we have to explain exactly what that is. But with that being said, I think it's so important for the consumer as well as the healthcare professionals to really understand, the evolution cannabis has gone in this country from starting when it got here in the 1600s to where it is today, and where it's going to go in the future. And so that's all about the endocannabinology, because it came to the front because what cannabis was able to do, and what they were able to do with that molecule. Yeah.
I talk quite a bit about the evolution of cannabis for 25,000 years. It's at the basis of most of the world's religions. The Buddha ate one hemp seed a day to achieve enlightenment. It's the basis of Shinto religion in Japan and ancestor worship in China, and the holy anointing oil of Judaism and Christianity.
It has
just to scratch the surface.
It has this long history of use, and it's only recently that the real physiology of the endocannabinoid system has been discovered, and so now we're seeing all the reasons why it works. And,
it explains everything to us, why our conventional medicines work or do not work, because a lot of those things are not made based on that science. On the science of endocannabinology is based on something that's probably controlled by the endocannabinoid system, and so a better understanding of the physiology, and then if you apply that pharmacology that we know about cannabis, it makes sense. Yeah.
Because cannabis, THC, and the cannabinoids are modulators of the rest of the endocrine system, aren't they?
Of the endocannabinoid system, which is a controlled, the endocrine system is just one of the physiological systems of the body that this endocannabinoid system controls. So we all know that the main job of the ECS, or the endocannabinoid system, is to maintain homeostasis or harmony with all the physiological systems in our body, including the endocrine, but all the neurological, the GI tract, the reproductive system, the the lung system. There's not a physiological system you can name that the skin, which is one of the biggest systems, you can name that this endocannabinoid system does not control. So we call that endocannabinology, the health and what happens when the system becomes dysfunctional.
The study of the function and dysfunction of the endocannabinoid system.
I think
And
a lot
the
of
tools
those.
we can use on it to modulate it.
Yeah, a lot of those diseases are a deficiency in the endocannabinoid system. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, and I think more broadly we would say a dysfunction, because you can have an underactive endocannabinoid system and you can have an overactive one.
What sort of conditions are associated with overactive endocannabinoid system? Can you say?
Diabetes, cancer would be two really good
Insulin
examples.
resistance are some of the bigger ones that are associated with an excess seizure disorders. The other side would be things like migraine headaches and fibromyalgia. Those are the under functioning of the endocannabinoid system. And so migraine headaches, even Parkinson's disease, IBS syndromes, those kind of GI complaints patients have, some of the arthritis conditions, they are all associated with endocannabinoid system dysfunction or a deficiency.
So tell us about the event that's taking place here. It's on August 3rd, which is a Saturday, right?
8 days away.
9 a.m., bright and early.
Yep, at Jupiter Next Hotel.
And so how long is it?
It's a 3-hour seminar, so we'll be running from 9 to noon.
And for people who are getting the CMEs, they get a certificate?
Yes.
Can the general public get such a certificate? Or?
No. You have to have the credentials to qualify. The continuing education credit.
And the first hour is going to be the hour that's sort of focused on the history and the science that allowed us to discover this endocannabinoid system. And when you're doing CME, you have to have everything you say based on facts. It has to be something that's been researched and supported by science. So we're going to do the first hour, just talk about the science and how we got to discover the endocannabinoid system. Then the second hour is going to be more discussion, people asking questions, talking about, what's going to happen in the future because of cannabis. I mean, what has it allowed us to do? What is it going to allow us to do in the future? And actually talk about the effects of what it had now. But because we don't have any of that based in fact, we can't give that second hour CME, so only the first hour is going to be CME for people.
I see.
Well,
I
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
So, how can people find out about it? It's at, I know the website, doctorsknox.com/events. They can register there, right?
That's
right.
correct. That's
So,
correct.
we have a nifty little flyer here. And in fact, speaking of questions, we will be taking viewers' questions and studio audience members' questions. If you have a question for Janice, Rachel, or David Knox, then give us a call at that number there on your screen, 503-288-4442. That's 503-288-4442. So there's a little promo for that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
Well, we're glad to do it. You know, you guys have been. You just recently gave a talk at TED, and I told your dad how proud he must be to see this huge poster of you covering the side of the building there. That was something, wasn't it?
Yeah. Like, it should have kept it up longer. But yeah, you never get used to a 50-foot version of yourself.
I can only imagine. And you two ladies just got back from the Virgin Islands. I know a past guest on the show, Carrie Arcady, was putting on the Carnival. Was that
It
it?
was Carnival, that's correct.
Uh-huh.
It was an amazing experience. You know, just to meet the people and look at the country. It was amazing in itself, but then we got to participate in a Rastafarian ceremony, and that was just mind-blowing. And these are people who have used cannabis for spiritual reasons.
Sacramentally.
Yeah, and now they're looking to, you know, get into the industry. And so we went there to talk to them about what that meant as far as medicine and the impact it can have on their community economically. You know, they're still having problems with the infrastructure after the two major hurricanes they had in the past, and a lot of that infrastructure has not been replaced. And so this multi-trillion-dollar business is something I think they cannot afford not
Industry.
to be part of. Yeah, they just can't. And they have beautiful country. I mean, just prime for growing.
I know a Iowa educator for the School of Nursing, Melanie Dreyer, put together one of the best studies back in the 70s on marijuana and childbirth and examining the Rastafarian population, mainly in Jamaica.
Jamaica, yeah.
Jamaica, I think was the name of that one.
Yeah. And they discounted a lot of the work because they weren't looking for the positives. They wanted to look for all the negatives of that study. And so we get that study.
They found positives.
Yeah, they found positives, but at that time, you know, they only wanted to hear
That's right.
the negative thing.
Yeah, it's criticized for not having a large enough patient population or study size to make any meaningful conclusions. But you know, it set a precedent.
You know, in just that line, there was this other physician, Tashkin at UCLA, that as a pulmonologist or lung specialist, he had examined cannabis. They suffocated some rhesus monkeys by giving them 20 pounds of cannabis in 5 minutes, and they died from asphyxiation.
Exactly.
Gee,
So
not
those
caused,
are the
yeah, it's caused by marijuana, but not by THC, by lack of oxygen.
That's
But,
correct.
the
That's
pulmonologist Tashkin eventually came around and found instead of marijuana causing lung cancer, it protected
That's
patients
right.
from
Appeared
lung
to do so.
cancer, and he
Yeah.
started
To do so, yeah.
to change his
little
tune, and
yeah,
that changed his
yeah.
funding, though, of course, too,
Of
from
course,
the federal
of course.
government.
Yeah, well, we know Dr. Abramson at UCSF who did studies for HIV patients, and he said for years he tried to get, you know, funding for his research, and as long as he was looking for something positive from that research, you know, they would not fund him. But as soon as he put a negative spin on it, he got the funding. So
Right.
that was quite interesting to know.
Yeah, got to play the politics.
Well, we have some videos. We often run a video from our friend Jorge Cervantes talking about cultivation. We have a little one here that Jorge just put up from an outdoor grow in 2016. We'll be right back after this video.
Grew that way for a couple of years, and as we got better soil and holes, the plants were getting bigger on their own. And a good buddy of mine that grew with me about 3 years ago said, Randy, let's do the math and see if it pans out to do a double cage. So we did that, and we said, oh yeah, if we get even 10% more or 20% more, we'll be paying for all the materials and the labor and still doing better.
Excellent,
So-
excellent. So you've got 2 cages here. Could you explain that to me, how that works?
We're trying to make the plants wide.
Okay.
It's not about tall, because if you just have a tall, skinny plant, everything underneath it is shaded. So we're trying to get maximum exposure for the sun, kind of like your sea of green or anything like that.
Okay,
So
okay.
It's about the width, not the height. Some of them get tall anyway, you can't help
Right,
that.
there's one right behind you. It looks like it's about 12, 14 feet tall right now.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's go through this one. We'll go through some others after this.
So
And
the branches can't reach the second cage all the time. Some of them can. So we've taken the bamboo. There's a couple ways to do this. You find a big branch, say, and we call it stabbing. So you'll go through the first cage. We'll push this branch down, and then we'll hook it under the second cage. And now that's got that branch coming out on a more lateral direction towards the second cage.
and then it'll eventually grow through this cage,
Then it'll
just like
grow
the other
through
ones
the
have.
cage. And then another thing we do is,
Okay,
I
yes.
don't have them with me, but when it gets out here, you can cut the cage with a pair of bolt cutters and pull it down one more square.
Okay, and
So
so
we're trying to get them to come out laterally as best we can. Now there are some challenges. You'll see some of the stakes have yellow flags on them, and that means the branches are more brittle.
okay.
Depending
Yeah,
on the
that's really
genetics.
interesting. Yes, yes. Some
Depending on the
genetics.
genetics or the phenotype, or however the right way to say that is, some of them just happen to be more brittle.
Yep, yep.
So then we get them out here and they're coming out the second cage. Now
Wow.
they just put this third cage on. So then last year we said the plants are getting so big, let's try a third cage. And then the
Wow.
same process will happen again.
Well,
We'll
let's
take-
see here. Stand by that. Yeah, stand back to the left there a little bit. Yeah, so we can really see just how big this plant is. And we're in like the 3rd week in July now, in 2016. So you know this plant's going to be, it's going to come up. It might be not quite twice that big, but it's going to get to be. Well, it'll come out to the 3rd cage, and you're standing right by the 3rd
Yeah,
cage, aren't
it'll
you?
Come out about, it'll come to the edge of the hole, most likely.
Wow.
And our drip system is only so far out, so we start hand watering out here, a little top dressing and hand watering out here to encourage those outside feeder roots to come out.
Sure, sure. And now this soil is, you've worked this for quite a while, haven't you?
Yeah, like I was saying before, organic certified. I think I was the 2nd certified organic farm in the Rogue Valley in '87.
Oh boy.
And then I went through the progression. So this field had winter squash, watermelons, onions, all kinds of different things in it for years before we ever transitioned to the medicine.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you've sure grown some big, big plants here.
Hey Kurt, would you hand me one of those 10-footers?
And you can see these plants. This one here's a good example. It's just, they're growing straight out. The branches are growing straight out, and they're getting these things to grow as wide as possible. And they grow really tall too. It's pretty amazing. So last year, I'm definitely coming back to this garden later this year because I want to see some of these 15-pound plants.
And he did. He saw a number of 15-pound plants. I want to welcome you back. We have the Doctors Knox here who are available to take questions and comments. If you want to reach us, call us at 503-288-4442. That's 503-288-4442. So, Rachel, you're on the governor-appointed Oregon Cannabis Commission. You want to tell our audience a little bit about what the Oregon Cannabis Commission is and
Sure.
how long have you been on it now?
2 years.
2
Well,
years.
1.5. We're working on our 2nd year. Yeah.
So how you were appointed by the governor?
As the attending physician seat. Yeah.
And tell us about it.
Yeah. So the Oregon Cannabis Commission was created to really contemplate a new medical program for the state of Oregon. Whereas OHA, Oregon Health Authority, facilitates the program, the Oregon Cannabis Commission was tasked with advising OHA in the future governance of the Oregon medical marijuana program. It is the governor's will to maintain a strong medical program. A lot of people out there think that it is the intention to get rid of it, and that's just not the case.
So have you consulted with Oregon's Governor Kate Brown at all? Have you
Not
ever?
directly.
Not directly,
Not
okay.
directly,
But with people in
yeah.
her office, they
Yes,
indicate that
yes, we
that's
meet
the goal.
regularly. Meet regularly. I am this year the chair of the Oregon Cannabis Commission, so it's my job to set the agenda and make sure that the commission is moving in the right direction, because we want to be impactful. We are not providing lip service. And what is really interesting, though, is that while these are public meetings, we only get a handful of people coming to share with us their concerns about the medical program, and that's really unfortunate. So I'm very concerned that we have a disengaged market. We have a disengaged industry. We have a disengaged patient population. Now, we typically have meetings in Portland, and certainly that might be a barrier for many people who live outside of the Portland area. But there are a lot of people and patients that are in the city of Portland who really need to come to these meetings, because we really do listen to public opinion. We serve at the will of the governor, but we are tasked to create a new framework for a medical program that matters and makes sense for everybody. And again, we take public comment very, very seriously.
Are there any points in the agenda for the next year that you can share with our audience?
Well, this year it's all about creating that framework, right? And you got to get into the weeds to sort of contemplate what's wrong with the program now, how a future program would fit in conjunction or next to an adult use program. There's a lot to contemplate, and so we're just getting started and digging into the weeds so that we can make some really great legislative concept recommendations and advise OLCC and OHA to help create a really robust and equitable program.
If patients or the general public are interested in attending the meetings or getting involved with the Oregon Cannabis Commission, how can they do that? Where can we send them?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just Google Oregon Cannabis Commission. You'll go directly to the .gov website, and everything's published on that page. The agendas,
so your next meeting is?
The minutes. Our next meeting has not been set yet, but they're at minimally quarterly. We just held our most recent meeting last week in Bend. So we did do a listening tour. We were in Medford back in April, Bend last week. So we will be planning a Q4 meeting, but I don't have that date just yet.
I see. Okay. We are taking our audience members and viewers' questions. If you're out there and you have a question, call us at that number there on your screen, and I can see.
What I will say, Paul, is
please do.
Yeah. So we've developed subcommittees. The subcommittees are research leadership, patient and social equity, as well as frameworking, and we are looking to experts and passionate folks from the community to help serve on those subcommittees. So certainly if anybody's interested in participating in the conversation, we would love to know.
Okay.
Love to know about you.
Just look up the Oregon Cannabis Commission on Google and go to that site then. So I can see we've got someone at our microphone. We do have a studio audience here. And if you have a question, call us at that number on your screen. Go right ahead.
Thanks so much for being on the show, everybody. Just cannot tell you how thrilled I am to see you. And Rachel, an additional thanks for chairing OCC once again and the work that you're doing there, because you guys are the only thing that is between the medical patients and what the state has done. And I am heartbroken, angry, disgusted, and terribly frightened by what they've done. They have utterly and completely trashed the medical program. And I don't believe that the vast majority of those people have bad intentions. But frankly, I was down there for Joint Committee. I've never seen more people that knew so little, that were so prepared to take action that meant so much to so many. I mean, they botched the recreational side, and botching the recreational side, botched the medical side. I have testified OCC. Rachel's heard
gone
me.
now, right? So
Pardon?
They are no more. Thank goodness, I guess.
The changes and restrictions that have been applied to the program are outrageous, unnecessary, and I would say there probably is an argument for illegal coming between me and my doctor. My doctor knocks, but my doctor. People are suffering and dying and going without, and even for ourselves at this point and at my age and for our needs, we can't think about any kind of a facility for us to be in because we can't have cannabis. We can't get what we need. We cannot get what we need. Patients cannot get what they need. And your report was outstanding. The question now is, will any of the legislators look at it? My experience with people is, people out here, patients, is that most people are afraid. They are afraid to talk to government or anything that's official, that it will make them a target. Aside from not knowing who and where and all of that, but tell everybody, get on your email list.
Yeah.
Is there any,
Well,
would you like to address that?
We have a good team. Anthony and I both, and really Anthony Taylor, he really pounds the pavement. But we were able to advocate for the 2018 Oregon Cannabis Commission report down in Salem on several occasions. We got to present to the Senate Healthcare Committee, who was very interested and engaged in our presentation and wants to see more medical cannabis material put in front of them so we can really start to do something, because I think people want to right some of the wrongs, but it's how.
Right.
I have two things I want to say to address, some of the statements you made, which are very true. And we see those echoed out with many, many, many patients. And so the two things I want to say is, number one, patients have to stop being afraid. This is your health, and you need to bind together as a group and go to them. This is going to be patient-driven. So all the fear, and I call it canophobia, all the fear we have to corral and get together as a group and approach our policymakers and our legislators. So that's the first thing I want to say. Patients, get yourself together, get over the fear, talk about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and the effects it's having on your life. Number two, we need to educate those policymakers. Most of those guys are making policies and they can barely say the word cannabinoid. We need to teach them about what this is all about. We need to teach them the history. We need to teach them, why this medicine is important. We need to stress the science and the actual physiology that we're addressing. Until we educate all of those people, they're going to make bad policies because they don't know. And they think they're doing the right thing. But how can you make something if you don't understand anything about it? And that goes for healthcare providers as well. That goes to product makers who are making products out there not based on science, but it's based on the economics, the greed, and based on what the policies will allow them to do. They're not making products based on science. And all of this boils right back down to that number one thing, educating the folks about what's going on.
And that's exactly what this show is about, and I really appreciate you folks for coming on and carrying that out, doing that. And that's exactly what you're doing with the introduction to endocannabinology class. It's coming up.
But those are the politics that we
3rd.
won't be allowed to talk about for continuing education credit. So.
Well, we can talk about those here. And
All
that's
right.
what I'm the political marijuana guy. We are taking viewers' phone calls, and I'm told we have a viewer standing by. Welcome to the show, caller.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi.
It may not be important, but my name is the same as your middle name, Paul, and you used to be my caregiver quite a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
But I have some memorabilia that I think could be called that you might be interested in. There was a man who got arrested at the Super Bowl over 20 years ago
In Arizona. Richard Davis.
And that's right. Would you be? And I'm.
Why don't you call me? My office number is 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606, and we can talk about that. You can see I have a number of collectibles out here on the table. Richard Davis, God bless him, passed away more than 10 years ago, but he had one of the first hemp museums, the first in the United States, and a traveling one at that, that he set up at the Super Bowl. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. It's 235-4606.
Yep, that number that's right there on your screen.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And then also, if they change the law and allow smoking rooms in the dispensaries, what might, do you know what they're calling them, or what might they be called?
Lounges is what I'm hearing, or testing rooms would be a good one. I know they are allowing that in some other states, just not in Oregon yet.
What was the first one?
Lounges, cannabis lounges.
The second one then.
I'm not.
Tasting rooms.
Tasting rooms is, you know, a lot of individual farms would like to be able to provide samples and market directly to tourists, just like wineries do. And so there was some movement, a bill introduced that would have allowed that, but it didn't get any traction and didn't pass here in Oregon. But it has passed, I believe, in Colorado and in California.
I see. So you don't have any expectations there for here in Oregon?
Not until maybe this time next year. I have not been in touch with the legislature about this directly myself.
Welcome to your guests, and I know that there are probably people who want to ask them some questions, so good to talk with you again.
All right. Well, thanks for calling, and just feel free to call our office. In fact, if you are looking for a doctor who can help you find medical marijuana recommendation, we have a referral service for people anywhere in the country. You can also call our office if you have any of those conditions, from chronic pain and cancer to gastrointestinal ailments and neurological disorders. Call us at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. So, Rachel, we were talking off camera excuse me. I meant Janice. Janice, we were talking just a moment ago, I'm sorry, about how you started with our clinic, and you were the first, doctor who
And I love telling that story because people always ask us, how do you get started? So I started off by telling them I spent 35 years as a board-certified anesthesiologist. So I am a board-certified anesthesiologist. And I like to stress the fact how much we know about physiology and pharmacology, because that's what we did. We take patients to the edge of death and bring them back.
Right.
And so we had to know those things. But to my surprise, when I first started in your clinics talking to patients, and maybe 10 to 15 minutes per patient, and it was clear to me that they wanted more than just that signature. They wanted this healthcare provider to be able to tell them, you know, how to use this plant safely. Some of them were coming for the first time. And, you know, and I think they wanted someone to help them who would not judge them. And so being that anesthesiologist who knew physiology, pharmacology, I realized I knew very little. I could not answer their most basic questions.
And I believe we operated in multiple states and dealt with a lot of different state medical boards and complaints from various physicians against doctors who their patients quit opiates and they're using cannabis instead. So we established what I believe was a pretty rigorous protocol to make certain that the patients had medical records that validated they had the condition. A lot of our competitors that sprung up, especially in the state of California, didn't do that.
I know,
But, you know, a lot of doctors said that they saw patients in our clinic that were much more ill and more severely debilitated than they were in other regular practice. I just wondered if that was something that was generally the case for you as well.
I think the patients we saw, I mean, it ranged. We had all ages, but the demographic that we saw the most are the 55 and above group. And these were people who, had either failed conventional medicine or vice versa. And some of them came in crutches and wheelchairs and cancer, and most of them been told to go home or that you have to live with it, or there's no more we can do for you. So I saw a lot of those patients, and it was clear to me that from a physician, whether it's here in Oregon or in California, I think we all should be in a position where we're able to answer more questions for the patients, to give them that comfort that we, because we are healthcare providers, we can give them some guidance. And so with that being at least how I love to practice, it sort of galvanized me to learn as much as I could so I can help those really sick patients who were told to go home and, get ready to die or there's nothing more. I mean, they were looking for a better quality of life. And I think coming through your clinic, let me see just how out of touch, I was as a physician, and certainly the conventional health system, and how we need to not reject the system, but embrace, that alternative medicine, cannabis medicine, or Ayurvedic medicine. It just opened my eyes that it was bigger than just allopathic medicine. So, yeah.
Well, I like your approach to integrative medicine and
That's
integrating
right.
these various modalities, and diet being one of the most crucial ones as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We know the endocannabinoid system is affected by certain things. We know it's affected by genetics and aging, pharmaceutical drugs, as well as nutrition. So food is the first medicine. It should always be told, that's your first medicine.
Let me add real food. Not just food substances, food-like substances, but natural whole foods for a natural whole body. That is what the body needs as building blocks for the endocannabinoid system itself.
We have a little video here that I'm always proud to refer patients to, where you folks were flown back to New York City to be on the NBC Today Show. So we'll run a few moments of this video and we'll be right back after this.
States in the Union now have legalized medical marijuana. But did you know that you do not have to get high to consume it? And that it is helping some folks avoid the opioid vortex altogether. So many people have questions about medical pot and have no idea who to ask or still feel uncomfortable even doing it. Enter the Knox family, all doctors practicing conventional medicine until they saw a need in their community. Watch this. Meet the Knox family. A little bit. A family of MDs, but how these doctors treat patients might surprise you.
The cannabis is really helping.
They counsel on cannabis.
We call what we do in the clinics integrative cannabinoid medicine because we know that cannabis is not the thing that's helping people heal. It is a tool that helps the body really heal itself.
All of these people had either failed conventional medicine or conventional medicine had failed them.
Janice was asked to fill in at a medical marijuana center in Portland, Oregon.
Of course, I had my preconceived notions about people who used marijuana. They just want to get high and be stoners. But when I went there, who I saw totally just rocked my conventional medicine world. I was so enthralled that I just started learning.
Meanwhile, their daughters were graduating from medical school with MDs and MBAs.
At first, I was sort of like, mom's doing something crazy again. But as she continued to talk to us about the patients she was seeing and the changes she was seeing in these patients from using cannabis medicine, I think both Rachel and I sort of got hooked. Oh, look at the changes that are happening in these patients that in a primary care clinic we weren't seeing with our own patients.
Their clinic helps answer questions from what form to take medical marijuana in.
I'm trying new products now.
To how much.
Reduce the amount of THC that you take.
Yeah. They see patients of all ages and ailments, from cancer,
chronic neck pain,
to chronic pain. Even a 15-month-old baby with an inoperable brain tumor named Daxton Olson.
We went through the why us phase for so long. The doctors told us that there was nothing in their arsenal to shrink the tumor.
Daxton was put on a chemotherapy regimen, but after 3 months of treatments and some complications, the tumor had grown. Daxton also suffered from daily seizures.
It's such a weird thing to even consider as a parent, am I really gonna give my 3-month-old son cannabis?
And then as soon as we got him on cannabis, we did another 3 months of chemotherapy, and his tumor shrunk 26%. His seizures have gone down from 15 a day to 1 every 2 weeks.
Look at you, you've grown so much.
Daxton's doctors told us they credit the chemotherapy for shrinking his tumor, but say they can't rule out that the cannabis is also helping.
Little one.
More conventional thought is that cannabis could be used as a last resort, but I really firmly believe there's a number of conditions that it should be your first resort.
The doctors of our generation, we want to be bold and courageous, and the changes that cannabis does make in people's lives even more compelling for us as people who want to be healers.
Wow. Janice, Rachel, Jessica, and David Knox, welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here. A family full of doctors. We got a bunch of doctors here. All right, so let me start with you on this, Janice. You don't prescribe medical marijuana, so describe what you do.
Well, it's still federally illegal, so we're not allowed to prescribe the plant. However, we are allowed to assess patients for their medical conditions. If they have a condition that qualifies them to get a state-issued medical marijuana card.
All right, well, since you're here live, we'll just talk to you like this directly.
Yeah.
I know we are down to just about 6.5 minutes left to go, and we have a studio audience member who has a question. Go right ahead, sir.
First off, I want to thank everybody at the table for all you've done for the cause. We need more people like you, and I appreciate what you've done. I just want to say I love this plant. This plant has taken my migraine headaches from twice a month to twice a year. I can't tell you how much I love that plant. Did I hear you mention something about it helping diabetics also? I'm a type 1 insulin diabetic, and I've kind of heard people kind of talk about it, but could you give us like 30 seconds on how I can fix myself with cannabis? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, type 1 is different from type 2, right?
Yeah.
Type 2 is easier to
and
treat
that's
and
right.
reverse, but
And-
type 1 is something that
Yeah.
that it really isn't reversible, is it?
Well, I think that's the first thing, to distinguish between type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. And we used to call type 1 juvenile onset diabetes. Those are patients who aren't making insulin for their body. Type 2 is a whole different field. But what I can say, I think we can definitely talk about turning type 2 around and changing that with food first and then using cannabis to fix that endocannabinoid system. But as far as type 1 diabetes, there's certain things we look at for improvement. How can we improve your quality of life? How can we improve neuropathic pain because of diabetes? So we look to improve the condition. We're not going to correct everything, but can we improve that condition for you so that you live a more comfortable lifestyle? And a lot of times we can get patients, even with type 1 diabetes, get them down to where they're needing less insulin. Part of the thing is correcting the inflammation in the body. Well, all of us are walking around with some degree of inflammation, some degree of endocannabinoid system dysfunction because of the world we live in, the stressors. So we can
And we
correct
should have an
those things.
alkaline diet too, right?
Yes.
That'll help.
I mean, there's so many
More
things
fruit.
that we think about when we're trying to heal patients. And so I love the fact that your cannabis helps you with your migraine headaches, but I will tell you this. When we talk to a patient about any kind of medical problem, we look at everything about you, including your spirituality. How can we fix, because all of that is contributing to your type 1 diabetes. So we got to make it all better.
What you said about food is the first medicine.
Yes,
Because that's
yes.
what I'm starting to learn
Sure.
about fiber versus things like
That's
that. So I'm just understanding this correctly. The fact that my body doesn't produce any cannabis isn't going to help change that.
No, it's not. It's not. But it will help you take care of all the things that may be a result.
I love the
Yeah, I mean, type 1 is considered an autoimmune disorder. There have been instances where even type 1 has been sent into remission, but those folks have gone through complete lifestyle changes, natural whole food diets, ketogenic diets. Where the science is leading us in terms of both type 1 and type 2 diabetes is how do phytocannabinoids help at the cellular level control insulin release and glucose uptake. So we're learning more and more each day about that. In type 2 diabetes specifically, and I know that's not what you have, CBD is a great anti-inflammatory. Type 2 diabetes is a disease of inflammation. So driving down inflammation through CBD's pathways is one approach, but we're learning more about THCV and its ability to help mediate glucose uptake out of the blood for diabetes too. So we're learning more and more each day, and autoimmunity in general, it really doesn't matter what you have. Autoimmunity is considered an ECS overactive problem. So using cannabis to help soothe and sort of tone the endocannabinoid system, it should make an impact.
When one of the criminal things with type 1 diabetics is the price of insulin. I mean, we can't deal with that here, but insulin was donated by its creators almost 100 years ago to the world as a nonprofit, and now we're seeing these companies making a huge profit on something where it should be very cheap, but I know people my friends, lawyers, and others who aren't here anymore because they had to ration their insulin until they died on their bathroom floor trying to get a shot of
That's
insulin. It's just
unfortunate.
horrible.
So those are some of the lessons, I think. Understanding the history of how cannabis is where it is today will help us not make those same kind of mistakes. Talking about single molecule medicines.
Monomolecular mercantile madness. That's what Dr. Todd McMaria used to call it. He was the first medical marijuana
that's what the
doctor.
pharmaceutical companies did. They sort of broke things off single molecules and made synthetic versions, and they hurt us. And they hurt us,
Indeed. You know, Dr. Todd McMaria was self-published a book, compilation of medical papers back in the 70s, and first pioneered the program.
He was a pioneer.
He was. He actually sold his business to me before he died from brain cancer. And then I sold it back to his sister after about 1.5 years. But he was a good guy. In fact, we've had him on the show here in the past month in video from some of our old events.
That's fantastic.
Well, we're down to just less than a minute left. People can. It's too late now.
Okay.
I want to thank you guys for coming on. To find out more about the introduction to endocannabinology, you go to doctorsknox.com/events, and you can sign up. There's even a scholarship program for low-income patients and a discounted rate for OMMP patients, right?
That's correct.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us, Paul.
Thanks
Okay,
again,
thank you, Paul.
David.
Thank
you,
you.
folks.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you, viewers. We'll be back next week. We're going to go out with 20 seconds of songs from Mr. John Cornette. Thank you. Good night. Restore hemp.
He's a hit at the hemp fest rallies and a hip at the hemp sock too. Strutting with fudge and brownies, and he wants to share with you. 'Cause he's the candy man, a sugar shaking, fudge making, brownie baking son of a gun. He's a candy man. We know that.